All right. So, and I'm going to go ahead and do this because I pulled this up. I was writing on a forum, Prepared Society, and there was a guy on there who was pagan, and I don't mean just like not a Christian. I mean like an avowed hardcore. I think he boasted of being a priest in the temple of Set, Satan, in my book, a pagan. And oddly enough, he and I a couple times kind of hit it off, and he understood me, and I understood him, and he agreed with me, and I agreed with him more than some right-wing conservative, super conservative Christian knucklehead that I was on there as well. This guy would get on and just rag on me and insult me and just blast on me, and so anyway, I'm going to cover this. This was written to a preparedness group which disallows politics and religion. In other words, you have to qualify to write in those two sections. Now, I have no comment as to how one can imagine to prepare without addressing those two spectrums, but it gave me a challenge to deal with politics and religion without addressing politics and religion, enter science fiction. So, and this guy said, this was his comment, "Holy Kurt Saxon Batman, nice read, informative too." So, in his, what do you call it, your profile, when it says where you're from, your place of residence or whatever, his read outside space and time. And that just set me off. I was just like, wow, that is the coolest way of, it was a neat way of putting it. So, and I just started writing and it just flowed, and he loved it. So, I just saw your location. That is superb. That is where I am making a feeble attempt to look at this whole big ball of wax from. It is called the big picture. It is unlike the vaunted survivalist leaders who cannot back away even far enough that right now they can't see the forest for the trees. It is utterly critical to be able to see not only the trees, but the forest, the region, the planet, the plane, etc. The major problem is that too many people inadvertently, ignorantly, etc., are basing their whole survivalist approach on a drastically narrow set of parameters. What I just finished talking about with Michael Bunker, and this applies to James Wesley Como Rawls and Joel Skousen and everybody of that like ilk. The major problem, okay, too many people inadvertently or ignorantly or deliberately are basing their whole survivalist approach on a drastically narrow set of parameters. What do I mean? I mean they're not taking a big picture into consideration. They're not taking a lot of things into consideration, either because they can't, they refuse to, or they won't, they're not able to. I don't know. You need to have a certain message to people to sell them your goods, your books and stuff. So it may be a monetary thing. I don't know. I have read Kurt Saxon. Thanks for the illusion. And Mel Tapan, one of the early survival writers. Uncle Ragnar Benson's big book of homemade, what was it? Explosives, homemade, whatever. Book's worth about $50, $100. I don't know what it is right now, if it's in print or not. But on the black market, it was pulling a high sum of money. How to build your arsenal and keep it secure. Yeah, Ragnar's big book, how to build your arsenal and keep it secure. And many others. And it is a mystery where the blinders on mentality came from. If anyone has some input here, I would appreciate it. It's almost like every single survivalist is reading from the same sheet of music. But the sheet of music has been run through a paper shredder and then pieced back together by an arthritic chimpanzee using your universal fixing substance. That's duct tape. That's from a science fiction book. And like Elmer's glue. So the first thing that they assume is that no major changes will take place in the structure and physics, geology, geography of this planet. They do not care to study geology, plate tectonics, geography, astronomy, meteorology, etc., let alone meld them all together to get an accurate big picture. The capability To look at these things from an out-of-the-box perspective is a totally different mindset from the usual prepper survivalist mentality. I am speaking here primarily of speakers, authors, leaders who should in truth only be followers, of being so close to the tree that they can see ants crawling on the bark, but they cannot see what kind of tree it is, not to mention if there's a giant python hanging over their head, or a pack of timber wolves, or a mama sow grizzly a few feet from them on the other side, with her cubs on the other side, let alone how big the forest is, if it's on fire, or if the volcano that they ignorantly chose to found their entire operation right on top of is about to vaporize them and their followers and blow them 20,000 feet into the stratosphere, or if Russians are about to invade. All right. The next problem is one which is no less important. It addresses the dimension of time. They mistakenly assume that things will always continue as they always have. This is called uniformitarianism, and this is where the time factor comes in. Our lifespan is infinitesimal. Even the few decades since World War II, let alone going back to the prior century or millennia, have seen vast changes in the world, but we think that no major changes are going to happen. Even in the shit hit the fan scenario is a totally nebulous concept in most people's and even leaders' minds. That should not be. We have centuries, millennia of history to access. And we should know access, and we should know what is going to happen. Not in detail, of course, but in very realistic alternate reality scenarios. If we cannot read that much history, we can at least read novels written by people who have read those histories and who also have a strategic grasp on the science of technology. Lucifer's Hammer by Jerry Purnell, and David Niven, Larry Niven, comes to mind, of course. Bonus points tell me why I say this. Nobody's ever answered that question, so I will just deal with it right here. In our military colleges, and this goes back to the Reagan era, and the Star Wars program that Reagan wanted to found or begin, was one of the books used in military teaching is a book called The Strategy of Technology, and one of the author is Stefan Possony, Possony, and his co-author was Jerry Purnell. So science fiction writers do understand science. That's basically what they are, is they're scientists who just write science fiction because it makes them a whole lot more money than science. I now know why that is, because they are the preachers of a false paradigm. The globe and aliens and ETs. So if you didn't have science fiction, we wouldn't believe all that. Most of the population wouldn't believe in all that garbage. Walt Disney. Walt was a military disinformation officer. That was his job. That's why he started Walt Disney. So both of these areas are inadvertently inadequate. Back up. Bonus points. Okay, there are many others. Lights out for a practical, tactical approach to protecting a community from MZBs, including crunching some hard numbers on the huge number of people needed just to man roving patrols, man observation points, guard posts, and the difference between the two, etc., etc. So you have some reality checks there, some real serious reality checks. And I said use the word tactical. Lights out is also strategic because these two men had a choice of, should we stay here with our families where we live in our own houses with our community in a suburb of, I believe it was San Antonio, or should we go join the survivalist community who this guy's been planning for this for many, many years? Read the book and find out the answer to that question. Okay. Ditto, of course, Lucifer's Hammer, Male Evil, Out of the Ashes series by William Johnston. As I was reading that series, I made the comment, this is not science fiction, it is history. It just hasn't happened yet. Just because of the brutal reality of what is portrayed in those books. So, and that series is good for military perspective in a lot of ways. The Last Centurions by John Ringo, for the minimum critical infrastructure needed for a civilization merely to survive. And he says in that book, and this is from a historical perspective, you need about 1/4 of your population to survive, or else you do not have enough infrastructure for anybody to survive. And that is my major premise. That book describes exactly what I am trying to do here. I don't mention it here, but there's another really good book called Ring of Fires, or it's also called 1632 by. Give me a minute. Later, Ring of Fire. I'll think of it here in a minute. So that one also, you have to bring enough people in to keep your infrastructure going, your food production, food storage, manufacture, production, etc., etc., etc. I think my screen was okay. Both of these areas are inadequately evaluated due to a fallacy in the approach. As I pointed out, the assumption is that nothing will change in the realm of construction of the planet. In addition, the mistake is made that nothing will change when comparing what will happen in the future to what has happened in the recent past. This area is easily shown to be ignorant, as look back in history a mere 50 years. A look back in history a mere 50 years will prove that wrong. Both of these fallacies can be described by a rhetoric fallacy called ceteris paribus, and it means basically all things being the same or everything else being equal. This is my problem with the survivalist mentality. It focuses on single issues at a time, assuming that all other issues will not affect that issue, and that is a non sequitur that does not follow. These are all aspects of life not only being ignored by survivalist leaders, but are in reality being warred upon by those very people who claim to be trying to help people. The truth of the matter is, they are helping themselves get rich at the expense, at the very high cost of not only financial resources of hundreds of thousands of families, but will, in the final analysis, cost those families more than their financial holdings, but many of their lives as well. And I would say that is, I wrote that many years ago, but that is an absolutely correct, accurate, and precise statement, and will be proven true. Our founding fathers were far more intelligent and seemingly infinitely more well-educated. They had a grasp on history, and they understood full well a very simple and very powerful truth. Gentlemen, we must hang together, or we will most assuredly hang separately. I stated those words on a forum of allegedly Christian survivalist. The owner of the group accused me of being a socialist and a communist. It turned out he was a registered sex offender in the state of Texas. What a surprise. We went around 1 or 2 rounds about survivalist mentality. This was on my group. I never crossed him on his, but he dropped me from his group and he left my group. He was a troll. He was like the head troll, and yet he was the owner of a group of 1,200 people. That was one of the most disgusting displays of ignorance and just complete lack of leadership, vision that I think that I've ever seen. Of course, he's not affecting as many people as some of these other men who I have had opportunity to try to reach, such as the Wyoming and, the Redoubt states people. But anyway, overall, the words outside space and time reminded me on both the physical as well as the temporal dimensions of being able to pull way back and see the whole panorama from beginning to end, and from the core of the earth, from the below the earth, the depths of the earth, to the entire universe, and plan on formulating a mission from those outside-the-box perspectives, kind of like the guy in MIB3, Men in Black 3, Griff, who was an omniscient character who could see all possible timelines at once. Here's where I got waxed religious using science fiction. This reminds me of someone I know. My dad is like that, my Heavenly Father. And I have learned after many years to listen to his ideas on how to do things and how to prepare for these events. Okay? Point being is, we do know, you can know someone who is omniscient. And he can give you forewarning, and he can give you great wisdom, and he can give you right down to the brass tacks where the rubber meets the road practicality stuff as well. So Griff didn't say he went back multiple times. Griff sees every potential future, every possible event that could ever happen. He sees every way Jay could have gone about his mission and all the ways it could have failed, not to mention a few ways it could succeed. There is a single timeline that actually happens, and he doesn't know which of the many possible ones it will be until he sees key details that differentiates the possible futures. Quote, unless this is the one where Kay forgot to leave a tip. They look out and see that Kay did forget. It shows an asteroid is heading for the restaurant. Kay comes back in and leaves the tip where the satellite bumps the asteroid out of the Earth's path. So, Griff says, this has become my favorite memory of human history. And unless we're in the one where Kay forgets to leave a tip, if he can see all possible futures and histories, then they must exist. There's no difference between a possible future and a timeline. Griff can't even tell which timeline he's in at every given moment. Basically, there are many worlds, but Griff's conscience is unlike ours and is spread across them. He is a fifth dimension being after all. Someone should have that kind of perspective. Well, this is me writing. That was from an article that I was quoting there. And then I'm saying someone should have that kind of perspective. Well, someone does. And if we talk to them, him, the Godhead, and listen to them and come to trust them, we can share that perspective and let it direct our lives for the better. Anyway, sorry, got me going. I love the perspective alluded to by outside space and state and province, outside space and time. And I wrote under the name Jeremiah there. So I am going to pause this. This is Jerry Nyman. If you're listening to this, you are the remnant.